She thought she was just renting out a room. She had no idea she was opening the door to the one person who would change her life forever. Margaret never liked the silence of her house. Once it had been filled with laughter, Sunday dinners, and the noise of children running through the halls. But now, as a widow in her 60s, the large Victorian felt like a shell. Too many rooms, too many memories. To keep herself busy, Margaret tended her garden, read mysteries, and wandered rental websites. Maybe renting a room would bring some life back into the place. That's when she saw Daniel's application. It was short. College student. First generation. Respectful. Quiet. Looking for affordable housing. No flattering details, just a blurry picture of a boy with tired eyes. Something about it stopped her. So, on a rainy Tuesday, Margaret stood at her door waiting. When Daniel arrived, he looked every bit the struggling student. Shoes worn thin, jeans faded, backpack frayed. He shifted nervously. "Mrs. Whitaker?" "Yes," Margaret answered. The tour was brief. She showed him the upstairs room, neatly kept but clearly unused for years. The lavender-scented sheets, the old desk, the garden view. Daniel nodded quickly. "It's perfect. I'll take it." "You don't want to think about it?" Margaret asked. He shook his head. "I can't afford to waste time. Classes start next week. Honestly, I didn't think anyone would say yes to me." His words surprised her. There was a weight in his voice no young man should carry. She agreed. And when he left to fetch his things, Margaret lingered in the hallway, unsettled but curious. At first, Daniel was as quiet as promised. He left early, returned late, and kept himself. Sometimes Margaret heard the creak of his chair or soft footsteps, but otherwise, the house remained hushed. One evening, she found him at the dining table, hunched over papers, lips moving as though rehearsing. "You work hard," she said. Daniel jumped, nearly spilling his notes. "Sorry, I didn't mean to take up space." "It's fine. What are you studying?" "Economics," he replied, then hesitating. "But I also write essays, speeches sometimes. It helps me think." "Speeches?" Margaret asked. He gave a shy smile. "I want to do something bigger than me. But first, I just need to pass my exams." Margaret brought him leftovers. He thanked her with a kind of gratitude that seemed too heavy for such a small act. The neighbors, of course, noticed. Margaret overheard them whispering near the fence. "Some poor boy living with her. Looks like trouble. College student, they say. You know how they are, loud, careless. She'll regret it." Margaret pretended not to hear, but their words clung to her. She hated being the subject of gossip. Yet when she saw Daniel that evening, sitting quietly on the porch steps, staring at the sky with tired eyes, she felt her heart soften. Late that week, Margaret passed by his room and noticed light spilling beneath the door. She paused, listening. "We are not defined by what we lack," Daniel's voice whispered inside. "Every setback is a seed, and every seed, if given care, grows into something greater." Margaret froze. His words carried conviction, raw and powerful. She stepped away quietly, but the sound stayed with her. The weeks passed, and Margaret began noticing things she hadn't at first. Daniel's shoes looked thinner each day, the soles nearly splitting. His jacket never changed, no matter the weather. Sometimes, in the quiet of the kitchen, she heard his stomach growl, followed by him pouring only water into a glass instead of making food. At first, she told herself not to interfere. He was a tenant, not her son. But Margaret had never been good at ignoring what her heart saw. One evening, she found him at the dining table, papers spread out, a lone candle flickering beside him. His head was bent, lips moving as if rehearsing. "You study hard," she said, stepping in. Daniel startled, shoving some papers aside. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take up space." "Nonsense. That table was made for studying. What's your subject?" "Economics," he said, before adding quietly. "But I also write speeches. It helps me understand things." "Speeches," he gave a faint smile. "Someday, I want to do more than survive. I want to change something. But for now," he tapped the textbook, "I just need to pass." Margaret nodded and returned a few minutes later with leftovers. He accepted them like a starving soldier handed rations. His whispered, "Thank you," felt heavier than the plate itself. If you believe kindness still matters, hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Sometimes, the smallest gestures plant the biggest seeds. Margaret's neighbors, of course, noticed. At the cafe, she overheard two women whispering. "Mrs. Whitaker's taken in some boy. Looks suspicious to me. A charity case, probably." Margaret stiffened, but said nothing. Still, their words followed her home. Was she naive, or had she trusted her instincts wisely? That night, she passed Daniel's door and paused. Light spilled from beneath it, and his voice carried through in soft, steady words. "We are not measured by what we lack. We are defined by how we rise above it." Margaret's heart caught. It wasn't just studying, it was conviction. A boy dreaming of something far beyond his circumstances. From then on, she noticed more. Daniel always rinsed his dishes, always left small thank you notes when she cooked, always offered to carry groceries despite his thin arms. Once she saw him in the garden, fixing a squeaky gate hinge with a borrowed wrench. "You didn't need to do that," she said. He shrugged. "You've been kind. It's the least I can do." That word again, kind. Margaret couldn't remember the last time someone had said it to her. One evening, she glimpsed a letter on his desk before he quickly hid it under a book. She had only caught one word before it disappeared. Scholarship. That night, as she sat by her window, she wondered, who exactly was Daniel? A poor tenant scraping by, or someone fighting for a future far larger than this little rented room? Margaret didn't know the depth of his struggles yet, but piece by piece, the quiet tenant upstairs was reshaping her lonely life in ways she never expected. Spring crept in, and with it sharper whispers. At the grocery store, Margaret bumped into Mrs. Patterson, the neighborhood watchdog. "It's admirable, dear, that you're helping him," Mrs. Patterson said, her tone dripping with judgment. "But do you really know who that boy is? Young men like that, well, sometimes they take advantage." Margaret tightened her jaw. "He's a student, not a criminal." Mrs. Patterson pursed her lips. "Don't say I didn't warn you." Margaret left the store with her basket half full, but her heart heavy. Was she being reckless? That night, she knocked on Daniel's door. "Come in," he called. The room smelled faintly of ink and old paper. His desk was cluttered but neatly ordered. Textbooks, stacks of notes, piles of scribbled pages. But what caught her eye was a sketch pinned to the wall. Her garden, drawn with remarkable detail. "You drew this?" she asked, surprised. Daniel flushed. "It's nothing, just a distraction." "Nothing?" She studied it closer. "This is talent. Why hide it?" He shrugged. "Life doesn't leave room for hobbies." His words struck her. A boy barely 20 speaking like a man twice his age. But doubts didn't fade. They grew. One evening, returning late from visiting a friend, Margaret noticed the porch light was off. Inside, the house was quiet. Daniel's door was ajar. Curiosity tugged at her. She pushed it open. The room was empty, but his desk was covered in papers. One notebook lay open, its words leaping out at her. "One day, I'll prove them wrong. One day, I'll stand on a stage and show the world that poverty is not weakness. It is the beginning of strength." Her breath caught. This wasn't homework. This was fire. She quickly stepped back, guilt gnawing. Just then, the door opened. Daniel entered, soaked from rain, mud on his shoes. "Sorry," he muttered, startled to see her in the hall. "I lost track of time at the library." Margaret forced a smile. Just be careful, coming home so late. But she couldn't shake what she'd read. On Sunday, she invited him for tea in the garden. He was reluctant, but joined her, sitting stiffly among the roses. "Tell me something," she began. "Why economics? Why not art if you can draw like that?" He stirred his tea slowly. "Because money is power. Policy decides who eats and who doesn't. If I understand it, maybe I can change it." Margaret tilted her head. "Change it how?" His jaw tightened. "So no family has to go through what mine did." The words hung heavy in the air. He didn't elaborate and Margaret didn't press. But she felt the weight of everything he wasn't saying. That night, she lay awake in bed. She had opened her home to a stranger. And that stranger was beginning to occupy not just her spare room, but her thoughts, her emotions, her heart. Who was Daniel really? A tenant barely scraping by, or someone destined for something far greater than either of them yet realized. The rain was relentless that evening, tapping against the windows as Margaret sat by the fire. She was half reading, half listening to the storm, when she heard slow footsteps on the stairs. "Mrs. Whitaker?" Daniel's voice was uncertain. "Yes, dear?" He stepped into the living room, clutching a folded letter. His hands trembled. "I didn't know who else to show this to." Margaret set her book aside. "Come here." He passed her the letter, and she unfolded it carefully. "Congratulations. You have been selected as a finalist for the National Scholars Leadership Award." Margaret's eyes widened. "Daniel, this is incredible." But Daniel's expression wasn't joy. It was fear. "I can't accept it," he whispered. "Not when I can't even afford another semester. If they find out I'm behind on payments, I'll lose it all." Margaret frowned. "Tell me everything." For a long time, Daniel stared at the fire before speaking. "My father left before I was born. My mother raised me alone, working 3 jobs just to keep us fed. Some nights, she went without eating so I could. She always said, 'Daniel, you're the hope I never had.'" He swallowed hard. "When she got sick, everything collapsed. No rent, no medicine. I took every job I could, dishes, warehouses, anything, but it wasn't enough. She passed before she could see me go to college." His voice cracked, but he pressed on. "I thought about quitting, but I promised her I'd finish. I promised I'd make something of myself. So I write speeches, essays, anything to remind myself why I'm fighting. Because if I stop believing in tomorrow, then all her sacrifices mean nothing." Margaret felt tears sting her eyes. She reached across and placed her hand gently over his. "Daniel, you are extraordinary. Do you know that? Most would have given up, but you're still standing." He shook his head. "Extraordinary doesn't pay tuition. Extraordinary doesn't buy shoes or keep the lights on. I'm one late bill away from losing it all." Margaret's voice grew firm. "Then maybe it's time someone else believes in you as much as you believe in yourself." For the first time, Daniel looked at her, not as a landlord, not even as a mentor, but as someone who might just be the anchor he'd been searching for. That night, Margaret couldn't sleep. She lay awake, thinking of the boy upstairs, a boy carrying pain too heavy for his years, a boy who still dreamed despite it all. She realized something. Daniel wasn't just a tenant anymore. He was a reminder that life still had purpose, that her house wasn't as empty as she once thought, and that kindness had a way of circling back. The next morning, she set breakfast at the table. Daniel appeared bleary-eyed as always. "You don't have to keep doing this," he murmured. "Yes," Margaret said firmly, "I do. And so do you. You're not quitting school, Daniel. Not while you're under this roof. If you need help, you'll have it." He stared at her, stunned. "Why? Why would you do that for me?" Margaret smiled softly. "Because once someone believed in me when I least deserved it. It changed my life. Maybe it's time I pass it on." For the first time, Daniel smiled, truly smiled. "Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We love seeing our community connect from every corner of the world." By summer, Margaret knew one thing for certain. Daniel no longer felt like just a tenant. He filled the silence of the house without trying. His books scattered across the dining table. The quiet murmur of his late-night rehearsals drifting down the hall. The way he left her little thank you notes whenever she cooked. But outside those walls, the world wasn't so kind. The neighbors had sharpened their whispers. At the farmer's market, Margaret caught the tail end of a conversation. "Poor woman, she doesn't know what she's gotten herself into," one said. "That boy's not right for this neighborhood," the other muttered. "He'll only bring her trouble." Margaret walked past them with her chin held high, but the sting burrowed deep. She had lived in this town for decades. She knew how a rumor could spread like wildfire. That evening, as she clipped roses in the garden, Daniel appeared beside her. He hesitated, then asked quietly, "Do they bother you? The neighbors, I mean." Margaret glanced at the street. 2 women lingered by the corner, pretending to admire a hedge while sneaking glances at them. "They've always talked," she said, her voice steady. "They talked when I married young. They talked when I buried my husband. And now they talk because I opened my home to someone they don't understand. But I won't let their words decide my life or yours." Daniel looked down, swallowing hard. "No one's ever said that to me before." "Then remember it," Margaret said firmly. You belong here. That night over dinner, Daniel finally asked the question that had been building. Why me? His voice was almost fragile. Why did you take me in? You could have rented to anyone else. Margaret set her fork down and studied him. Because I saw something in you, she said. You remind me of myself when I was younger. I once believed I could change the world too. And maybe I needed someone to remind me it's still possible. Daniel didn't answer at first. His eyes dropped to his plate, but when he finally looked back up, there was a new light in him, something closer to determination than doubt. From that day, the rhythm of the house changed. Daniel no longer hid in his room. He studied at the kitchen table, filling the air with the rustle of notes and the scratch of his pen. Margaret found herself cooking larger meals, setting the table for two, without even thinking. Evenings were no longer silent. Daniel read his speeches aloud while Margaret listened, sometimes correcting his phrasing, sometimes just clapping when he finished. His words grew stronger, his voice steadier. One night he finished a piece about poverty and resilience. Margaret leaned forward, eyes shining. You must share this, Daniel. The world needs to hear it. He shook his head. Who would listen to me? I did, she said simply. And if I did, others will too. Don't wait for a stage, make your own. But the world wasn't quick to open doors. A week later, Daniel returned from campus, shoulders heavy. A letter crumpled in his fist. They rejected me, he muttered. The debate team said I wasn't polished enough, said I didn't fit their image. Margaret snatched the letter, her eyes narrowing. Polished enough? Fit their image? That's nonsense. It's fine, Daniel said, but his voice cracked. I'm used to rejection. No, Margaret snapped, slamming the letter on the table. Don't you dare accept this. You're not defined by their blind standards. You have something none of them do. Authenticity, passion, truth, and I won't let you throw that away. Daniel stared at her, stunned. Margaret had never raised her voice before. Do you understand me? She pressed. Yes, ma'am, he whispered. From then on, Margaret became more than his landlord. She became his coach, his supporter, his shield against the world. When his shoes finally gave out, she quietly replaced them with a pair from her late husband's closet. When he hesitated to buy new books, she slipped money into his notebook and claimed it was change she didn't need. More than that, she poured her energy into him. She taught him how to project his voice, drawing from her years of hosting church events. She timed his speeches, gave him pointers, and refused to let him undersell himself. And slowly, Daniel began to bloom. At campus, he spoke at small gatherings. At first, only a handful listened. But by the second and third time, more students leaned in, drawn by his words. Professors started to notice. The boy once overlooked was now being heard. At home, Margaret watched with pride. This wasn't just growth, it was transformation. After a youth event one evening, Daniel and Margaret walked home under the streetlights. You're going to change lives, you know, Margaret said. Daniel gave a nervous laugh. You really think so? I don't think, she said with certainty. I know. For a long moment, Daniel was silent. Then, quietly, he said, You're the first person who's ever said that and meant it. Margaret smiled, her chest tightening. She had once thought she was simply giving a boy a roof. Now she knew she was helping him find his wings. Don't forget to share this story with someone who needs hope today. Because sometimes hope arrives not in miracles, but in strangers who choose to care. The morning of the competition, Margaret could barely sit still. She ironed Daniel's suit twice, polished his shoes until they gleamed, and packed him a breakfast he was too nervous to eat. You look sharp, she said, fussing with his tie at the doorway. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. The suit was borrowed, a little loose in the shoulders, but he carried it with dignity. I don't feel ready, he admitted. Margaret held his gaze. No one ever does. But you don't need to feel ready. You only need to be yourself. That's enough. For a moment, Daniel just stood there, as if memorizing her words. Then he nodded, eyes bright with determination. The auditorium was buzzing when they arrived. Students in crisp suits rehearsed under their breath. Professors shuffled papers, and judges sat with pens poised. Margaret found a seat in the second row, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse. When Daniel's name was called, he walked to the podium with measured steps. To Margaret, He looked both impossibly small and impossibly brave. For a heartbeat, the room seemed unconvinced, just another poor boy in an ill-fitted suit. But then Daniel spoke. "I stand before you today not because of what I have," his voice rang, steady and strong, "but because of what I have lost." The room went still. I lost a father to absence, a mother to sickness, nights of my childhood to hunger. But I also gained something. I gained the belief that our struggles are not cages. They are the fire that forges us. Poverty is not weakness. It is resilience, and resilience is power. His words built like waves, each one stronger than the last. My mother told me, "Daniel, you are the hope I never had." And today I tell you, each of us carries that same responsibility, to be the hope someone else needs, to rise so others may see what's possible. By the time he finished, the silence broke into thunder. Applause erupted. People leapt to their feet. Some clapped through tears. Margaret, tears streaming down her face, clapped harder than anyone, pride swelling in her chest until it felt like it might burst. When Daniel stepped down from the stage, trophy in hand, his eyes searched the crowd until they found her. She mouthed, "I'm proud of you." He gave her the smallest, most honest smile she had ever seen. That evening, back at the house, Daniel placed a trophy on the mantel. But it was his words, not the medal, that mattered most. "They offered me a full scholarship," he said breathlessly, "and a spot on the national debate team. Mrs. Whitaker, this changes everything." Margaret pulled him into a hug, her voice breaking. "No, Daniel, you changed everything. You." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Invitations poured in. Professors asked him to guest lecture. Local papers called him the boy with the voice of fire. But at home, he was still Daniel, the boy who watered the roses with her in the mornings, who carried groceries, who left thank you notes on the fridge. Only now Margaret noticed something new. The house no longer echoed with silence. It pulsed with life, with laughter, with hope. For years, she had lived in loneliness. Now she found herself with a companion, a purpose, and a renewed faith in the future. One evening, as Daniel packed for his first trip abroad with the debate team, Margaret lingered in the doorway. His suitcase lay half-filled, his notes stacked neatly on the desk. "You'll be all right without me here to eat all your cooking?" he teased. Margaret chuckled. "I'll survive. Just remember, no matter where you go, this will always be your home." Daniel's smile faltered as he turned to her. "You didn't just give me a room," he said quietly. "You gave me a future." Margaret swallowed the lump in her throat. "And you gave me back my life." She thought she was just renting out a room. Instead, she opened her door to hope, to purpose, to family. And he thought he was just surviving. Instead, he discovered his voice and the people who believed in it. Together, they proved that sometimes the smallest act of kindness doesn't just change one life. It changes two forever. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and join our community. Share it with someone who needs to remember that kindness still changes lives. Because you never know, you might be the next Margaret or the next Daniel in someone's story.